Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how to tear down the engine completely to drop it off to the machine shop. Every machine shop is going to want your block to this point. Maybe not you bring it to them. Most machine shops are used to having something like this get torn down. They don't want to store your AC compressor. They don't want to store your crusty valve covers, and they don't want your dented oil pan. Take that stuff off. You clean it with your garden hose or put it in your dishwasher, something like that. Save them some time. Save you some hassle, because more than likely they'll probably just throw it away because they don't think you're going to save it, but you may have some hard on for this stuff for some reason. So, to make your life easier, make their life easier, I'm going to help you guys out. So I'm going to show you guys how to tear down things. This is a small block Mopar, so that's mostly what I do. So I'll show you the specifics on this, but I did work at a machine shop. I've seen everything from Oldsmobiles, Buicks, small block Chevy, small block Ford, big block Mopar, all the big blocks, all the small blocks, B-Series Cummins. So there's a lot of different things to each block. And honestly, you just look at it and be like, if that's removable, pull it off. That's pretty much all there is to it. Some stuff you're gonna need specific tools. Should you buy it for that? If you're just gonna do like one engine, you know, probably not. Just let the machine shop do it. But you can still tear a lot of this down and save them some time. Because everyone always complains about the time that it takes for machine shops to get stuff done. Well, if you can do your part to help them move things along a little faster, then guess what? Your project's gonna get done a little bit faster. And that's gonna save you some headache and them some headache. So, obviously, like I said, I'm gonna show you the specifics of the small block Mopar on this, but like I said, just pay attention. If it's removable, remove it. And we'll go over things like where specific cracks happen on blocks and on the heads, and what to throw away and what to keep. So yeah, we'll go from there. We're gonna get tearing into this thing. All right, so we're gonna start with the front cover stuff. Usually you're not gonna see AC stuff on like most small block Mopar stuff. It's pretty rare. Unless you're in Texas, then you're gonna see it some. But all front accessory stuff, 9/16. So power steering pump, that's gone, throw that away. AC stuff, I'll make a short of this. You can do something cool with these, but I won't put it in this video. And then water pump, throw that stuff away. Don't save like water pumps and stuff like that. Like the 30 bucks you're gonna save, it's gonna make a bigger headache in the long run. Don't do that. Just spend the $30. It's not a big deal. If it takes you another month to come up with 30 bucks, it's gonna be well worth it. Just do that. Trust me, I've done all this stuff. I've tried saving nickel and diamond. Doesn't work. Never works out in the end for you. An AC's for pussies. Unless you're like 50 or older, then it's acceptable then, you know, old guys gotta stay cool. They're angry enough. But 50 and down, don't be a puss. Roll down the window, listen to it, let that thing sing. Also, if you're gonna make fun of me about using air tools, I have electric tools too. I just like to bust these out every once in a while, you know, feel a little nostalgic, work on this old iron. So don't give me no shit in the comments about it. And these bolts on small block Mopars, a lot of time, these are through bolts right here. So these things will usually be completely gone. This one's in really good shape actually, so that's going in the keeper pile for sure. So take that.
As you talk about nickel and diamond.
Yeah. There it is. Must be that one's one of the blind ones, but yeah, that one goes into the valley. Yeah, she brings up a good point. Mancini, they sell like a whole kit for this, for the water pump. It's like 50 bucks, and then you have all the bolts in there too, and you don't have to worry about old routed bolts. So, probably should just do that, but I'm not gonna only keep these bolts. Time for electric. We'll give the newer one a try. And if that don't work, then I'll go to electric. So your crank bolt, that's gonna be 1.25 inches. They're usually pretty good about not being stuck on these, so don't worry about that. And you got a big old hex on there, so you don't gotta worry about running it. It's not a small block Chevy with a dingy little bolt, so That's nice. This is gonna be your timing cover. See the water pump I beat off because that stud broke off inside. It's fused into it. So that's nice. So I had to break this timing cover, which kind of stinks because this actually was a nice one. So on these, you want to look right here on these ears. The water, when it flows through, it makes little tiny explosions and it pops all this material away, and the aluminum's worse than the steel. So this will get all eaten away. I'll see if I find one. I'm sure I have one that's eaten away. You'll know what I'm talking about if you see it, but it'll be razor thin. You won't be able to get a gasket to seal. It'll be worn on that backside also. So then it can leak water into your oil, and then you'll be chasing that, looking at head gaskets or cracked heads or something, and just be your timing cover. So that's something to look out for. All right, so after getting that chopped off, you can see growing something. That's a new one for me. I've torn a lot of these apart, never seen one grow anything, so that's pretty cool. Here, you check the slack. Everyone always likes to use like, oh my God, look at the slack in this time. I've never pulled anything apart that doesn't have slack in the timing chain. They're all gonna have slack, so you're not special because you got slack in your timing chain. That's just the way the cookie crumbles on these. It's gonna be war slap out, unless you're lucky. So this is your fuel pump eccentric. It's offset of your cam, you see there. And it's basically just a cam for your fuel pump. So it comes around, pushes up, pushes the fuel. These are good to save. They don't really go bad, so save this. Scared to stick my hand out here and be honest with you guys. Don't know what creepy crawlies are coming out. So this is trash. Don't keep that. Oh, this is one of the plastic ones. These, see, I just made fun of you guys for geeking out about these old wore out timing chains. I'll geek it out. This is one of the plastic ones. You see the teeth? And this thing was probably running like that. You can see that it's just to quiet it down. There's actually aluminum inside there. Most of the aftermarket ones, they're gonna be steel, so. But some of these factory ones, I've seen Slant 6s with them like this. I've seen big blocks with them. Most of the small blocks I've seen have all been steel ones. So this is kind of rare. So that's kind of why I'm geeking out over it. But that's trash, no good, don't keep it. Unless you're gonna make like a necklace or something, a pimp necklace. If you're gonna do that, more power to you. So this is your oil slinger. This keeps oil on your timing chain. Some people say it pulls oil off. I don't think that's it. So these drip out oil when the valley fills up, and it kind of directs it, or it comes out of this front cam bearing and directs it onto the oil chain or the timing chain to give it oil. I don't think it's, back then they didn't care about like parasitic loss and stuff like that. They're just pumping shit out. So they just want it to live long enough to get past the warranty period, and then it's good to go. And that's for all brands. Don't think your Chevy's special. Don't think your Ford's special. None of this old shit was special, okay? Take an LS, a Hemi, or a Coyote, and it blows all the old stuff out of the water. So if you think this is the greatest engineering marvel, any of this old stuff, you need to spend a little more time on the internet. That's what it was. And some of you guys, a lot of you, especially maybe because most I deal with Mopar guys, a lot of you Mopar guys think the Mopar's the best thing to ever come out of Detroit. I don't think that's the case. I think they all have their problems. They all have their pluses. Yeah, it's fun to make fun of each other back and forth, but you know, at the end of the day, as long as you have an American V8, you're pretty cool in my book. If you have Mopar, you're probably a little bit cooler, because that's what I like, you know, but it is what it is. And these are kind of neat. They have like these lines in them just on these bolts, so you always know what these bolts are when you see them. Some flex plate bolts have them, but they're different head diameter. And then some of the crank bolts, like the actual, that would hold the flex plate or the flywheel on. Some of those have them, but not always. That's your cam plate, that's what holds your cam in. So all this stuff is ready to slide out now. Definitely save these. Save the bolts. I've ran them without the slingers. Well, this is an oil slinger. This is just like an oil tab, I guess they'd call it. But to be honest, I've never put one on an engine I've put back together. Should you? I think so, but I don't know. You can also direct oil onto your fuel pump eccentric, which I have seen those get pretty scored up. So I think it's a good idea to run these. Is it, if you don't have one, do you think it's worth going out and get it? I don't know, maybe. Probably not a bad idea, but for me, I probably won't put it in. So this is gonna go in the keep pile. Not a whole lot in the keep pile. Usually these factory valve covers would have like a little triangle gusset type of deal, just to help extend the pressure outwards so they don't leak as bad. These ones are missing it. Those things are kind of good to keep, even if you have like chrome valve covers, like aftermarket ones that are just stamped steel that are thin. You can just clean them up and paint them black and put them on there. So I think those are a good thing to keep. Scare there's gonna be something to jump out at me. See, since it doesn't have little triangles, someone tried just gooping silicone on there to get them to seal. So that just proves my point on keeping those guys around. Lots of carbon buildup. Looks like typical 360. But when you're taking these apart, obviously, you want to do it evenly across. Don't just pull one bolt out, because it'll bend these tubes or shafts, whatever you want to call them. So you can keep these, if you're just doing like a basic budget build, you can keep these rockers if you're just doing like a refresh. They're good for like stock spring pressure. If you get crazy or high RPM, they will bust this out. The push rod will come through them. It's not really a big deal. You can get these super cheap. So if it busts them, just replace them if you want to save some money there. I don't think these things are a bad idea to keep around if you're keeping it hydraulic, obviously. So if you get it surface and decked and stuff, you know, you got to remeasure your push rod, stuff like that. So, but you can throw the push rods away, or if you don't need it decked, you can keep the push rods. But if you're taking it to the machine shop, you'd probably get it decked, your head surfaced. But if you don't, you can keep these push rods. They don't oil through, so it doesn't really matter. You can just clean up the outside, and they're pretty easy. Just a little bit at a time. See, it's kind of tough because some won't have pressure on them, and then you hit them with like an impact. It's really best to do this with like a ratchet or something, but I'm not too worried about it. See that it gets oiled up through these holes, and that's what sends the oil down all these. There's holes in these where the rockers sit. These bolts, good idea to keep. I've bought bolts from like Mancini. They had like this 12-point kit. I think it was like All-Star or something. It was supposed to be for a Mopar. They're way too short. So keep these. Good idea to keep these on hand. Which I was a little disappointed in Mancini for selling something like that, since they just sell Mopar stuff. So, you know, what's your excuse for that? These, good idea to keep. Just your little spring mount for your throttle return spring. Sandblast them, scuff them up, paint them, do whatever. So, heat pipe, these are good. Throttle bracket, usually you're gonna have to modify, and especially if you go to an aftermarket intake, it's gonna be a pain getting everything to work, especially with kickdown. So your best bet's probably do like a low car setup and buy some adjustable one. I've cut them up in the past, extended them, that's to make them work. It's kind of ugly unless you really take your time, which I don't take my time with anything, so it came out pretty ugly. Not a keeper, this is EGR stuff. Throw it away. If you live in a state where you need that stuff, move away. See this? This is something that can easily get lost at the machine shop that you most definitely need. See, this is why you should take this stuff off yourself, and then you can keep it so there's no loss. your distributor hold down. Or if you do lose it, send me a message and I'll sell you one for a bunch of money, because I got a bunch of them. Your distributor, this old crusty thing that's been sitting out in the open like this, probably shouldn't keep it. Should you go buy a $60 GM HEI distributor to put in your Mopar? Probably not. That's probably not a good idea either. You say, but it's cheap and they work good. Yeah, they work decent sometimes. Half the time the Chinese thing falls or fails, and then you got a problem on your hands. And the other problem is they usually don't fit in Mopar cars. They weren't designed for it. Usually the distributor is normally right up against the firewall. On F bodies, there's a cutout in the firewall just for the distributor to sit in. How are you gonna get that to fit in? And then you waste the money on the thing and it doesn't even fit in the first place. So don't buy the shit. Now the intake manifolds, these can be pretty stuck on there. So you don't want to pry in here because you might get into the intake gasket surface, which that's going to be a bad day. So this China wall, this doesn't matter. You're going to put silicone on here. If you screw this up, it doesn't matter at all. But on small block Mopars, there is pins in here. So if you feel like you're hitting something solid, you're probably hitting something solid. But just kind of go off the center. In the back, same way. This doesn't matter. So you can see here, cam, not rusty. You could reuse this if you want. Are you going to? No, you're gonna take that stock cam and throw it away. Here's those pins I was talking about. So, see, whoever did this, someone did intake gaskets one time. Had these rubber seals. Normally they'd be cork from the factory. And you can see these are like Felpro gaskets, they're blue. But that was done a long time ago. Obviously look in here to see if you're gonna reuse the stock heads. Check those out. Make sure they're not all blown out. Can't even talk, I'm blown out. Pattern's supposed to take them out a little bit. I'm not too worried about these heads, so I'm not gonna do that. Head bolts, these are a good idea to save. I save them, I reuse them. I've never had problems with head gaskets blowing at not doing anything crazy. I'd say 400 horse and below, you'd be fine with stock head bolts. Probably even above that, you'd be fine. But I keep all these. Obviously, some heads you can't use stock head bolts, so if you plan on going to a different head, don't keep the stock head bolts, throw them away. These look like a factory Mopar piston. A lot of factory Mopar pistons have those two little divots in them. I don't know what it's for, but more likely they're factory. So honestly, if your heads look like these, you're gonna wanna take the time and clean them up yourself and look for cracks and see how terrible they look. Because if they're super bad pitting and like, it's not worth your time in the Brampton machine shop. It's not worth the machine shop's time to even check them out. But you can mostly look at this stuff and be like, yeah, that's junk. But you can't really tell. That might be just a lot of crud in there. So it's all stuff you gotta pull off and clean yourself to save everyone a little bit of time. And then top of the cylinder walls, you check for a ridge. Everyone's like, if this is like a common misconception, a lot of people, they'll feel for that ridge. If they don't feel the ridge, they're like, oh, cylinder walls are good. You can hone it out. That's not necessarily true. They can still be oblong, wore out. The major thrust side could be more worn than the minor and so forth all around. You know, it's not cylindrical anymore. So, and you can't see that with an eye. Like, it can still be out of spec and everything looks fine with the naked eye. And that's why we have micrometers. That's why you don't measure by looks. So, you know, if your grandpa tells you and he opens this up, he's like, oh, back in the day, we used to just hone that out, we run it, you know, blah, blah, blah. You know, you're wasting your time, in all honesty, and just do it right. You know, that's kind of the whole point of this, is just do things right, and it'll save you a lot of time and money in the long run. If you just do things right, get things machined right, don't just try to slap stuff together to get out there. You know, if you're on a budget and you got to drive to work the next day and you got a piston laying around and it broke a piston and there's a little gouge in the cylinder from breaking a piston, slap it together. You know, you got to do what you got to do. But if you actually want to do something right and, you know, have like an engine that you're proud of, or, you know, want to drive across the country, this is what you should be doing, you know, looking at things like that and be like, yeah, that definitely needs to be bored. Or, you know, if it's smooth and you don't see cross hatching, that means there's material that's been removed. That means it's too big. So we're gonna pull the lifters out. These lifters are pretty rusted in the bore. Flat tap it. You shouldn't save the lifters if you're on a budget and you got like a Magnum or Vortec where it has roller lifters. You can save those and reuse them because it's a roller. You'll be all right. As long as they're good, you know, just look at the wheel. Make sure it spins freely. Make sure the wheel itself isn't tore up. But flat tap it's new. The cam, definitely throw away. You can get cams pretty cheap, you know. Sometimes you gotta go off of, or not go on the Summit and stuff. Like I use Jim at Racer Brown, I've said it in a couple of my videos. But I can get a brand new flat tap it from him with Johnson lifters, and it's like $500 something. That was like last year, but you know, if it's $600 for everything brand new, that's a guy who knows what he's doing. He's asking you your combination to grind you a cam specific for what you're doing. So, you know, that's someone you want to call him. He's someone you can learn from, you know. You're not going to learn anything from reading something on a Summit ad. Like, oh, this cam makes power from 1,500 to 6,000. This is exactly what I want. But, you know, you might have changed the heads or this or that. And there's a lot more to cam specs than, you know, just what Summit tells you on there, or Comp tells you, or this or that. And if you call these guys who grind these cams, they'll explain that stuff to you. You know, they do this stuff every day, and they know what they're talking about. I'm not going to try to tell you, explain it, because I don't exactly have every detail down in my head. So I'd say probably the majority I don't know. So I'm not going to try to spilling the, or explaining it, because I don't know that. Then I'd look like every other asshole on YouTube, just spewing shit out of my mouth. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you what I do know, and that's that this lifter does not want to come out. Another good person to watch, if you want to learn more about cams, is Daniel Powell, the Powell Machine. He's a cam grinder, and he does machine work, and he's pretty funny. So I like watching his stuff. Never personally talked to him. I've commented back and forth on Facebook together, but yeah, that's as far as we got there. Now obviously you want to be a little nicer with this stuff, just so you don't screw up any of the bores of the lifters themselves, but this one's not going to cooperate. I see a lot of small block Mopars with wore out cam bearings, and that's a lot of the reason why you see them with like low oil pressure. 360, it could be the rod bearings. 318, it's probably the cam bearings that are doing it. But that's what a Mopar camshaft looks like. They have 904 diameter lifters. I think small block Chevy's 842. You can see the cam bearings, they're pretty wore out in here. They've had a rough life. I've definitely seen worse, but a lot of the Babbitt's starting to come off. I've seen them down to the copper and still run, but so that's it. And then once you get the cam out, you can just drive the lifters to the bottom. Like I said, be careful you don't scrape the bores up. And obviously when you're prying around this, be careful of your deck surface. And this is a big thing. This is something you really need to listen to. A lot of people will take these deck surfaces and they'll take like a wire wheel or a sanding block or something and try to clean these up, and they think they're doing something better. You're honestly better just cleaning it off with like a rag and some alcohol, and it's going to be flatter than whatever you do to it, other than getting it actually decked at a machine shop. You going at it with a wire wheel, you're doing a ton of damage, and it's one of those things where it's only something you can measure and it be out of spec, but you can't see with your eye. Like there'll be a dip down here because people spend a bunch of time on here because there'll be discoloration from heat and stuff, and they would try to clean that area out. and there'll be a huge low spot, and you see it when you're decking it. It'd be low, low, low. It never would have sealed. Some people get away with it, you know, but just don't do that. Especially a lot of old time guys, they're like, oh, I just clean that up with a water wheel and slap it together. Don't do that. You're gonna make another headache for yourself. So even if you want to take it to the machine shop and save yourself some time, don't do that. They don't want to see that. They don't want to see the surfaces cleaned by you. They don't want that. That's not going to help anyone. So don't do that. Don't clean surfaces. Like gasket surfaces, yeah, I mean, you can if you want, but if they're going to tank it and blast it, you don't need to do that. So I wouldn't worry about cleaning any surfaces before you take it to the machine shop. On oil pan, it says 392. This is like one of those things that someone would see and they just run with this. They'd let their little imagination just go wild and they'd be like, oh, it's a 392 block. We'd hear stuff like that at the machine shop all the time. They just read a random number. They'd be like, oh, it's this. It's like, that's not a thing. And they'd be like, it is. That's what it says on it. It's like, no, it's not. And then they'd sit there and argue with you when you deal with engines all day. So, you know, maybe have a little faith in your machine shop. The guy who's been doing it, you know, 20, 30 years, sees engines every day. He probably knows more than you, who's been watching YouTube videos or listening to your Grunkle Steve. You know, he's probably an idiot. So maybe listen to the guy who does it every day for a living.
It's alive.
All right, so we're back. New day. We're gonna finish this one up. But anyways, so got the bottom end all done, or oil pan off. We're gonna start working on the bottom end. So first things first, we're gonna pull our oil pump off. So these bolts, obviously good to keep, nothing wrong with these. Oil pump, stock oil pumps are pretty good. They're usually adequate for like most mild stuff. A new oil pump, I don't remember what they go for, but Melling's the only one who still makes one anymore as far as like a high volume or a standard volume. You can bump up the pressure with a stock pump. You can pull this cotter pin out, shove something in there, and then that'll compress the spring more. Or you can just get a high pressure spring. Like a lot of small block Chevy pumps, they'll come with like different springs for what you want to do. The Mopar ones are not that lucky, obviously. But if that's something you want to try, you can do that, or just buy a new spring. Someone really laid the silicone to this, you can see. Small block Mopars, they don't have a gasket here. There's a company that makes copper gaskets and stuff for these. I've ran them in the past. I've also ran them with no gasket. The gasket kind of makes you feel better, but they work without it. So not really something to worry about, but don't do that. This was a dumb idea, whoever did that. I'm willing to bet all these rod bands are probably shot. I think this is a milling pump, honestly. It says, yeah, M72, so this is a milling pump itself. Pickup tubes, I'd throw this away. Unless you have like some super solvent that's going to dissolve all that stuff. But it's really hard to look up in there and get it, and a new pickup tube's super cheap. And you can make one yourself pretty easy. So, and nice thing about Mopars is they thread in. I didn't show it on camera, but I had to work the pistons back and forth with a hammer to get them to move. And then once I got them to bottom dead center, I just stuck a 3-stone hone in there and clean up the cylinders enough to hopefully get the pistons out. That where it gets thick at the top of the cylinder, it's called a ring ridge. And like AutoZone, like your parts stores, they have a ring ridge tool that goes in there and cuts that top out. If you don't know what you're doing, I wouldn't recommend one of those because they can take a lot of material out and you can actually screw up your cylinder walls so bad where you're not going to be able to bore it and the block's junk unless you sleeve every hole. So that's actually not terrible for a small block Mopar, believe it or not. See if this crank's cut by the part number on the back of the bearing. It'll have like, say 10 or something. So this one has a date on it, 175. So these are actually original bearings. That's nuts. And then you can see that there's no signs of like fretting or anything. These actually look pretty good. Probably reuse these if someone didn't let it sit outside.
Tap it. Careful not to let it hit the crank journal if you're going to reuse the crank. And you're not really supposed to pound on the rod bolts if you're going to reuse it because you can knock them out. So try not to do that. Use your foot. See, and then this one's going to be a pain. See, there goes my rod bolt. So obviously, you don't really want it to drop. You don't want stuff to hit the floor, but these I don't care about, so it doesn't really matter because you're going to throw your pistons away if you're taking it to the machine shop, because number one thing that happens in the machine shop is they get bored as far as blocks go. So yeah, don't worry about the pistons too much. Most of the time you're going to throw your rods away. You can resize these. These might not be in terrible shape just looking at the crosshatch in the bottom of the rods. There's some slight discoloration, so obviously you measure everything. The machine shop's going to measure everything for you. Buzz through all these. If you get one, you know you get the gist of it. Tap it out lightly. The bores are really messed up on this because it sat outside. All right, something I forgot to mention is to make sure your rods are numbered and your rod caps are numbered. So obviously 1 through 8, and then do the same number on the cap as you do the rod. Most Mopars are numbered if you look at them, or like the later Magnum sometimes will have some weird symbol that matches up to each other. So do whatever you want, you know, but it just makes it easier if you just do numbers so everyone's on the same page. Now I'll pull the crank out. Cranks, like everything else, you just do the opposite of the torque sequence. I don't really care about this one, so I'm pretty sure it's still outside inside, but you know, and you should go gradually, like bust them loose, but like I said, I'm not worried about it. So on your main caps, they're pressed in by the bolts themselves. Like you don't press them in. They call it the crank register. Like that one's already loose. They shouldn't be loose like that. They kind of sit in there. I don't know if you can see, but we'll move this. So if you look in here, there's steps, and then that is what presses in there. This would be like that, and then see, like this one's, that's too loose. That'd be out of spec. So you should have to kind of wiggle them around a little bit, like this. Maybe give them a little tap with, or like a rubber mallet or something. So on Mopar, your center one's going to be your thrust bearing. So look on both sides of the bearing, both sides. No major signs of thrust wear. Main bearings usually look good on Mopars. It's usually just the rod bearings that are tore up. Make sure that these are numbered also. Mopars are always numbered from the factory, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 1's always at the front of the engine for everything, and that's how you determine where number 1 is for your cylinder. Number 1's going to be the furthest cylinder also. Yeah, that's a little worrisome why that's like that. And then this one's super loose too. Like usually you got to fight with these pretty good, and these are, the bearings look really good, so I'm assuming someone replaced them, and that's what happened. Yeah, like these are bearing, be able to tell. Obviously the wider caps are definitely a little harder to get up, but just take your time. Don't try to beat up the cap. I'm guessing they're factory bearing. But if you look at a bearing, it's always on the backside, all the markings. So it'll be like a little ACL logo, you know, a Clevite logo, and then I'll tell you what it is. And then I'll say 10 under, 30 under. If they're standard, they usually don't say anything. This says 175 on it, so I guess these are the original bearings. They look pretty good other than this front one, to be honest. Then we'll plop this guy out. So see this sticking up right here? We can knock that out before it falls out. That's our oil pump drive. Oh, it's actually broke off the oil pump. Broke off in the oil pump. Tap those out. And then throw all these away. The machinist doesn't care about seeing these unless he built the engine previously and it's like low miles and something happened. But if it's just a block that you're bringing in, he doesn't care. So that's pretty much a bare block. Now we'll take it off of here and get all the cam bearings out, freeze plugs, all that sort of stuff, motor mounts, just the excess stuff, and oil fill plug or oil filter adapter, and then it should be ready to go. Also, this is where your dipstick tube goes. They're a pain to get out. If you plan on keeping it, good luck. Especially on something like this one where it's sitting outside, you're gonna fight it the whole way. So on this, we're gonna show you how to get the freeze plugs out. You need a chisel or pry bar and then just a hammer. So here, your sleeve's over here. So you're gonna go try to fold it around the outside of the sleeve. If you try to hit it on the inside, it's just gonna hit the center of the sleeve and then it's not gonna let it come out easy. So best bet's to try to go around the outside of the sleeve and not drop them in there like that. So we're gonna have to fish that one out. Wherever it went. I can't even feel that one. So that one might have went quite a ways, but do this one. Same deal outside of the sleeve or cylinder. See, that one dropped down. You want to make sure you get all these out because if you don't, then that'll create hot spots in the cylinders. And when that cylinder heats up, it squeezes that freeze plug up against the outside of the block. And then that'll push the cylinder in, and then you'll have a high spot in the cylinder, and that is not a good time. If you're lucky, you can fish them out. If not, you gotta shake the block around like a small child to try to get its lunch money, and that's no fun because they're heavy. And obviously, if you have brass freeze plugs in it, that's not gonna happen either. So, I think we're out of luck with this one. Not out of luck, but for right now. And then we'll just go down and knock all the freeze plugs out the sides, on both sides. I want to get one so I can show you guys. So there we go. Wowie. And there's our whole pile of freeze plugs right down there. So you grab your channel locks, you fish one out, maybe. Get the bite, yank it out. There's one. There's two. There's our other little guy we lost. Try to get this out without breaking it. For me, it doesn't really matter. I just drill and tap these anyways. Oh, we got it spinning. All our circle track pans have a like dipstick level in them. It is nice having the option to do it for a street engine. Obviously, having a dipstick's nice. Oh, this is a 1-inch socket for your oil filter adapter. You see that there? These can be a little bit of a pain to pop off. They shouldn't look like that, but these are another thing to keep. This will clean up. You can probably get these new. Never had to look for one, but I'm sure you can. These Mopar oil pressure sensors, they take a special socket. I have one, but this is easier and I'm not going to reuse it. But if this came out of a running car, this would be something good to keep. Even if it's nasty, put it on there at first. Make sure you have oil pressure, then you put the new one in, just in case you have a new sensor and it doesn't read right. So that's a good thing to keep as long as it works. And you see here, there's more freeze plugs on the back and some hex drives or square drive pipe. So this one, these are concave plugs. So they're disc shaped and then you pound in the center and it expands the outside and that's what goes around this. I don't know why they didn't use a normal cam plug, but that's how small block Mopars are. So usually you can just pound through the back, or when you're taking the cam bearings out, just knock them out the back. I was just trying to drive through the center and pry it out, but not going my way today. See, that one we caught early enough, just started coming up, grab it, pull it out, boom. Obviously, I messed it up, but you can kind of see the previous shape of it. Oh, got this one in the butt. These you can throw away. They're not worth keeping. This one looks the worst, but still came. Luckily, these are into oil. All these plugs are, so they should come out pretty easy. This block has rust and oil passages, so if anything was going to be really bad, it would be this one. But even this thing still came apart. Now we really got to get that distributor drive out. Could have a little hex on the end of it. It's obviously broke off. So there's one down in here that goes to the actual oil passage. It's a pain to get the socket on an extension to do it, but I mean, if you're lucky, you have a socket that would fit through there, but I'm not that lucky. I have snap-on square drives. Buy the individual ones that you need if you do plan on doing this, because they'll sell you like a 1/4 inch and a 3/8, and that's an anvil on most of your ratchets, so there's no point. Some dowel rod. We'll tilt the block up. You can literally do this by hand, or you can not waste your time and just smack it with a hammer. But see it drop there. Then I'll flip the block over and show you. So what I just knocked out was there's 2 little plugs that go in there. They're barely pressed in there. They're super easy to knock out. And the only thing left to do would be cam bearings. And then we got a plug right there. We'll pull that out. Yeah, that little guy not going to come out without some heat. Yo, we got it. All right, so cam bearing, you can start from the back, front, doesn't really matter. You can drive them in or out on a Mopar. Some stuff it's only one way or the other, because they'll trap themselves in there. The Mopar you can get out, small block. Like the Hemi, you got to go from the back and then work your way to the front. So all depends on what you're doing. Say the majority of the time, it's probably safer to go in from the back of the block and then go out the front. It's been a while since I've done a lot of this stuff, so, but anyways. So there's a cam bearing. Yeah, not much to it, but just work your way down. On the small block Mopar, the last one's a really small cam bearing, so I got to change the mandrel out on it. But you kind of get the gist of what's going on here. You just keep working your way down, finding your hole. Then you tighten it up when you go in there. This is one of those things I definitely wouldn't recommend buying unless you're going to do a lot of engines and put cam bearings in yourself. It's just easier to have the machine shop do it because it's pretty easy to screw up installing. Taking them out, not so much. Don't do it with like a chisel. You're not going to be careful enough to do it with a chisel, and you're going to knock them out. So don't do that. You're not saving anyone any time with that. You may just end up screwing up your block. All right, change the mandrel, so we're back for this little guy. So just a little size comparison. That's a rear one, inside one of the normal ones. Your dowel pins and your bell housing, those need to come out. So on a small block Mopar, they're pretty nice because they have a through hole, so you can just pound them out. These ones here, these shouldn't affect anything. You don't need them either, so you can pull those out if you want. Leave them. Doesn't matter. Actually, some intakes, they don't have this hole in them, like aftermarket intakes, so you got to take them out for those. So I'll just show you that real quick. But I wouldn't bother keeping these ones around. These ones are just roll pins, so they're easier to get out as I struggle to get it out. That is a little roll pin. We'll pull these out. If you don't have a dowel pin puller, again, not a big deal. Machine shop's going to have it, and that's something you don't got to worry about. So this is a snap-on dowel pin puller. I'm sure someone else makes a cheaper one if you wanted. Buy once, cry once, that's what I say. So I think it's like $400 for the small SAE set. And then this is just like a Harbor Freight slide hammer that came with an axle bearing puller kit that I got. So this isn't anything special. We got that one. All right, so we got everything apart. Your heads, I'd leave those assembled. Let the machine shop take them apart. They like to feel for guide wear when they're pulling the valves out of it. So I think that's a good idea to leave assembled. Let them do that. Unless you already want them to go completely through it and do guides, then you can take it apart and do new valves and stuff. Then you just leave all that stuff out. So that's up to you and what your plan is. So a lot of this has to do with what your goal is. Like if you're going to do any type of mechanical cam, those rockers are out the window, obviously. If you're going to keep it hydraulic, not a bad idea to keep those. Same thing with push rods if it's just a milder build. Timing cover, obviously that's good to keep if you didn't break it like me. Factory distributor, Mopar factory distributors are great. Their electronic ignition is good. As long as you get a quality ignition box. The Mopar Chrome boxes and orange boxes, they're just little Chinese units now. FBO definitely makes the best ignition system, has a rev limiter built, a rev limiter that you can choose the rev limit for yours. It's a little dial on the front of it, and they're made in the USA. So FBO ignition, they're good. Stock pulleys, good idea to keep. You can clean them up, paint them up so they look nice. It's kind of hard to find pulleys that work well with the Mopar, especially if you're going to keep it V-belt. There's a couple different companies that do serpentine stuff, but they're pretty expensive. Your cam thrust plate, good idea to keep that. Same thing with the little oil tab. Your cam eccentric for your fuel pump, keep that. Distributor hold down, keep that. Return spring, not a bad idea, keep that. Your oil filter adapter, what they're called, keep that. These bearings are just there, don't keep those, throw those away. Oil pressure switch, I was saying that earlier, good idea to keep that as long as it worked, as long as it's showing oil pressure. Put that on the new build first and then replace it because you never know what you're going to get for parts store. Oil pump, not a bad idea to keep. You can take it apart, see what it looks like, go from there. Oil pump drive, if it's a basic cam, you know, nothing crazy, you can keep that. Certain cams, like if it's a billet core, then you have to have a different gear, is what I meant by that. Some of the factory ones are pinned. I've seen them pinned and not pinned. If they're not pinned, they're just pressed on, so people get a little worried, like if they have a high volume pump, that they're going to spin that on the shaft itself. It's definitely a possibility. I could see how that could happen. Main caps, obviously keep that. Rods, if you're just doing like a factory rebuild, you know, something like that. Small block Mopar rods are pretty good, especially at stock horsepower levels. The only downside is they're kind of heavy, and it's going to cost some money to get them resized. So I'm pretty sure the bolts alone are $80, plus having someone spend the time to resize them. And then I think a new set of Eagle rods is like 300 something. So it's pretty close just to get stock rods resized as it is the Eagle rods. Some people say these are better than the Eagle rods. Uh, Maybe if you're like a truck motor, I mean, they're big and heavy, but any sort of RPM or performance, I'd take an Eagle rod over the factory rods. I know there's going to be a bunch of people jumping down my throat for that, but that's the way I feel. And yeah. Then your factory crank, you're just going to look for grooves that you can catch with your fingernail. This crank is actually in really good shape for a Mopar, other than the rust on it. Most of these, they usually have some pretty big grooving in them. People will probably argue with me on that. I got like 6 other cranks that I can show as proof. They do like to eat up the rod bearings and the rod journals on these. So finding one. And if you keep the crank, they are a good crank. They're strong. If you found a nice one, or you had someone who could grind one reasonable, and the balance isn't terrible as far as like Mallory metal, these are a good crank. This isn't something that you have to throw away or replace. It just depends if it needs to be reground. That's really going to be the selling point on it. If you can just get it polished and then balanced, this is definitely the way to go. And then if you get keep the stock rods and then find another cast piston that weighs the same, then you don't got to worry about it. You can just run it. Then the block, obviously you're going to look for cracks all throughout the block. Like I said, you don't have to take the cam bearings out yourself or really do any of this, but the whole point of this is just to make everyone's lives a little bit easier. Look at the cylinder walls, see how bad they are. You can take like a 3-jaw hone, a cheap one from Harbor Freight, clean up the cylinders, look for any cracks or like huge pits. So then you can mentally prepare yourself going into it, knowing I'm probably going to need a sleeve on this hole. Sleeves aren't anything to be scared of. Also, there's a lot of old timers who are scared of sleeves. Don't be. Just be scared of who's installing the sleeves. That's the biggest problem. Could be someone like me. And then another good idea is to run a tap through all the bolts, all the bolt holes, and be like, so if one's screwed up, you can tell your machinist to put it in, put in a time cert or something like that that's actually perfectly straight, like on a machine. So it's a good idea to do that. Just run through all those. Doesn't take a whole lot of time, but can save you a lot of headache. You know, main caps, head bolts, all that stuff. Every threaded hole, go through there. You can clean this up. You can get oven cleaner, clean it up, spray it off yourself. And then as soon as you're done spraying it off, blow it off, cover it in WD-40, and then you can get extensive looking for cracks on the decks and stuff. Same thing on the heads, you can do that. And then you're gonna look for any discoloration here, like it got hot and it spun a main bearing. That's just something to look for. And then you'll know that you need a line hone. So this is all just kind of prepare yourself for cost or what the machinist may have to do. So then you're not surprised and be like, oh, I tore it apart and it looked great. Well, you probably didn't look that hard, you know? And not to mention they're going to use AC magnets and powders and stuff to detect the cracks, or they might wet mag it. There's different ways to check for cracks. But yeah, that's just something to look for. So obviously keep all the bolts to the end, I'd say. Obviously you should know some bolts you can throw away, some you can't. Then cam, lifters, timing chain, harmonic balancer, 2-barrel intake, definitely throw that away if you have one of those. Factory ones, you can find nice chrome valve covers or whatever, where you can paint those up. I don't like all the tabs on them. I always think they're ugly when people keep them, even if they paint them. And I have a bunch of painted ones up there, as you can tell, because I'm cheap. But you know, Marketplace, eBay, you can get used ones super cheap, like 20, 30 bucks, and I'll spruce it up. And especially an aluminum intake. Aluminum intake and valve covers and a nice air cleaner cover makes anything look like a hot rod. So yeah, that's money well spent. But yeah, that should do it. All right, so that's the general overview of what we're doing with that, or that's an overview of what to do with your block. You know, just kind of be mindful, pay attention to things that may crack. They crack in weird places all the time. You know, you may get everything machined up and they didn't catch the crack and it's in some weird place, and you know, that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. So it is what it is. Be prepared for things like that. Not everything's gonna go your way. These are old blocks. You never know what could happen. So, yeah, I think that's where we're gonna leave off. Thanks for watching. If you have any other ideas, throw them in the comments. Try to think before you speak. Like if you torn one engine apart in your whole life, you probably don't know that much. I've torn hundreds apart. So, and then there's people who've torn thousands and tens of thousands apart. There's a lot of old time. I'm not saying I know everything, but this is just some of the stuff that I picked up from the machine shop I learned that can help you and help the machine shop that you're bringing your stuff to. So, not that I know more than them, but save them a little bit of time. But thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. Stay tuned for more content. I got a Hemi going in a dirt modified. So, yeah.